我们这些独栋全部都是仿造美国西部 Jackson 后那个小镇做的。
Every day, actually, we would like to have more happier life, but somehow it was lost.
I really feel this is my dreamed place. I would this to be part of my life.
早上好，莲香美利坚，又是梦幻般美好的一天，让自由的风吹遍这片充满勇气的土地上。希望你能有美好的一天，美梦成真。
Make sure the house is spotless. Spotless. Tonight we will have a party, and I prepare some of the stuffs for American snacks and dishes. It smells so good.
特别好。
即将来拥抱一个微笑，谢谢。
Hello and welcome to Barnes Film Festival. I'm Jane Ray and I'm here on behalf of the Wickers. Some time ago, the Wickers were lucky enough to be able to fund the film that you've just seen, Americaville. And in a second, I'm going to be able to introduce you to the man who created it, not only as the director, but also as the director of photography and the editor and a co-producer. We're going to meet Adam James Smith in just a second, but I wanted to say that I hope you have just seen and enjoyed Americaville. If you haven't yet seen it, you're welcome to stay with us, but I cannot promise you there won't be plot spoilers. So that's just an FYI. But now, please welcome Adam James Smith. Hello, Adam. Thank you for joining us on a rare trip back to your homeland in the UK. It's wonderful to see Americaville again. I want to ask you first, what compelled you to make it?
Thank you, Jane. Great to be with you. And firstly, before I get into the question, I just want to thank the Wickers organization and Jane in particular, for funding the film. I was a runner-up, I think, in the first year of the awards back in 2016. And it wasn't just the award amount, the funding. It was really the advice over the past few years that has been so valuable from the Wickers team. So thank you very much. It's a great organization doing great things for filmmakers. To get into the question, how did I go about making the film? Well, this was my first solo feature documentary, but I had worked for a couple of other Chinese film directors before, and had been working in China for a couple of years already. So it just felt like the right project at the right time. I also sensed that the US-China relationship, political relationship, was going to become more important on the world stage, and that there might be bumps in the road, and that in some way the film could maybe speak to this or illuminate some common issues between the two countries. So I think that's why I really felt compelled to start this journey making the film.
That's very prescient, because right at the beginning, we see our main character. I'm going to try and pronounce her Chinese name. Leo Hui, who calls herself, she has chosen the American name Annie, as in Annie Get Your Gun, which I think is highly appropriate. But very early on, you hear her see Trump's big face looming into her her perfect American living room. And she says, he's quite unfriendly. And at that point, I think you think it's going to be a film full of wit and irony about East-West relations, which indeed it is. But as well as that, there is this core of a really strong emotional journey that faces up issues of childlessness, of loneliness, and Annie's marriage. I'm dying to know what, how you managed to get Annie to reveal herself to you, and what's happened to Annie now. We last see her in the real Jackson's Hole, but I've got a feeling that's not where she is at the moment. But tell us about Annie.
When I first moved to the town, I think I spent the first month interviewing hundreds of people, hopefully to find a protagonist. And it wasn't until I met Annie where I really felt this was somebody who could carry a feature documentary film about the town, to tell the story of this town through her. And many of the people I spoke to before her were interested in the town because they could buy a house and have a yard and escape the city. And Annie was looking for those things, but she was also looking for more. She was looking to achieve or fulfill or attain a set of values, freedom, happiness, spiritual fulfillment through Christianity. She was already a Christian at that point.
She became a Christian when she was a student in America, and
that's right.
It communicates that those were happy days for her.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And she was really hanging a lot of her hopes on moving to this town and pursuing her idea of the American dream. And in a way, I thought I could set up the film as a traditional call to adventure story. So this person leaving the world that they know, which was urban China, and entering a new world and setting off on a journey to achieve a goal. And her goal was to live some aspect of the American dream, and to achieve happiness and freedom, as I mentioned. And I really felt compelled to go on this journey with her, with my camera, over the couple of years I shot with her.
And how's she doing now?
As far as I know, she's doing well. I think she spent most of her time during the pandemic up in Jackson Hole rather than in downtown Beijing. So I think in a way the pandemic offered an opportunity to reach a goal of spending more time there. And working remotely.
It's such a moving scene where she takes the American dream forward to a point where she creates her own little Hollywood sequence in which she has a child of her own, she has a happy marriage, and she enters the church. And a lot of key scenes happen. She seems to be able to she's shy about talking to you directly, I feel, sometimes in front of the camera, but allowing you to film her praying seems to be her way of communicating one remove. Is that fair?
Yes, that's true. With making documentaries in China, it's common that it takes a while for your subjects to open up to you. There's a long period of building trust with documentary subjects there, and particularly as a foreigner. So I really invested a lot of time with Annie before diving into those difficult questions. A lot of the recording earlier on was quite, I shouldn't say superficial, but it was easier scenes. It was scenes of her cooking, cleaning.
The Fruit Loops. Oh,
cooking, yes. Throwback American dishes, from
yes.
the 1950s recipe books. And that was fun.
Tuna and green jelly. No.
That's right. And mayonnaise mixed together. It's a throwback American dish that I tried, and it's not as bad as you think.
Really?
It was actually quite tasty.
Okay.
I haven't made it for myself yet, though.
Really? What a surprise.
So earlier on, I shot those easier scenes that she felt comfortable with, and then we eased into situations and scenarios that earlier on would have been very difficult to film. But as she opened up, I felt more comfortable asking if I could record her praying in the church, where she really did open up, not necessarily opening up to me as the filmmaker, but opening up to God, in the presence of God in the church in Jackson Hole. So that was the space she felt comfortable in, to open up, while I was filming. So I really seized that opportunity as much as I could for interviewing, and also those praying scenes that you see in the film.
Mm. And what about the husband? What about that man? What can you tell us about him?
You know, I don't know. I didn't get to know him very well. I feel like I got to know him in some ways through Annie, because she spoke about him.
Never being there.
Yes, a lot, and not being there physically. And most of the time that I was recording with her in Jackson Hole, he wasn't there. He was either in downtown Beijing, or he was elsewhere in China. And I only met him, I think, twice. The first time was quite early on recording, my first summer there. And then the second time, I think, was 6 months after that, where I recorded the dinner scene towards the end of the film. And it was quite difficult filming with him that one time. That was a hard scene to shoot. But he obviously has a big presence in the film, because Annie talks about him a lot, even though he isn't there. So in a way, he is quite a big character in the film that I had to address.
The look on your face. I think we shall leave it hanging there. But as far as you know, they're still together.
They're still together, as far as I know.
Right. Okay. Well, we might, Emily, my colleague at the Wickers, and we might mount a free Annie campaign, but hopefully it's all working out for the better.
I think many people feel like that who have seen the film.
It does. When we see her, when we look into her eyes when she's been crying, it's
right.
Incredible, because I haven't seen that in a film, a documentary made in China, where you have got quite that close to a female protagonist. So right. I think it really cuts to the heart when you do. But turning now for a moment to the creation of Jackson's Hole itself, which is extraordinary. There's one key scene which doesn't seem to get resolved, and that's where a group of bikers come up to the sentry point, and they're told that they cannot go further. And the bikers respond, but this road existed. It's been here for hundreds of years and existed before your private community existed. So we demand to be let through. And I'm wondering what the truth of that was. What was really going on there?
So it's a good question. I shot that scene by chance, really. I was actually at the entrance of the community, where the guards dressed as cowboys stand in cowboy hats. And it's quite an impressive entrance to the community. So I was there recording with the security guards. And then suddenly these bikers approached and blocked the road and demanded that they be let through. So obviously this was a public road, as they explained in the film. And the community was built on top of the public road. And then they fenced it off and put a gate up, a checkpoint. So obviously a lot of the local people who lived there before Jackson Hole was built feel quite annoyed, because they now have to go around the community, in order to get anywhere, really. And it's Jackson Hole is built at quite an important place in between these two valleys, just north of Beijing. So it's really prime real estate up there in the valley, north of the capital. The scene isn't resolved because it was obviously it was I didn't know the bikers. I think after the scene was shot, I think the security guards were maybe a little annoyed that I had recorded that. So I just kept the camera rolling, right? And I didn't quite know what was going on, if they had been there before, if they returned. I had something else to shoot later that day, so I couldn't really hang out much longer to see if they would come back. But there is a lot of tension and politics and issues with building new developments in China. My film doesn't really delve into that too deeply because I was so focused on Annie's story and her emotional journey, attempting to live out this American dream in the town. I did record peripheral things around the community, sort of local politics and gossip and issues going on, to do with the community itself and how the community was expanding. But that could have been a whole other film, I think. You know, if I hadn't have found such a compelling protagonist, I think maybe I would have made that film about the community itself.
That's fascinating. We get hints of it, don't we, when we see the rolls of barbed wire and the security fence and all that. You know, it's a bit like the Truman Show. You see the banks of cameras and everybody's being watched in paradise and checked up on. And I gather from what we've learned from the film that replica towns are de rigueur, or were, when you first started filming in China. They were talking about Beverly Hills coming along and little Switzerland. And now this is the point, this is the kind of commercial break where I put to you, Adam, that, you know, Barnes would make a fantastic replica town. I mean, what is there not to love? The riverside walks, there's the otters, the natural wetlands, all these bijou shops, 2 Tesco's extras, locals, sorry, I should say. 2 Tesco's locals. Cute pubs, gorgeous Georgian townhouses, village green, 3 ponds, I think. 3 ponds. That's
wow. Well, Jane, it's great that you bring this up because there is a very Barnes-like town, replica town already built in China. It's called Thames Town, and it's on the outskirts of Shanghai. And I've been there. I spent about a week there, and I actually scouted for a film there a couple of summers ago. And it's something I'm considering. You know, I got to know several people there, and I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think it's as dramatic as Jackson Hole. I think replicating American life is perhaps more dramatic than replicating small town England on the outskirts of London.
Well, whether or not, you know, you get your scones right, and whether the jam goes on before the cream or the other way around. I mean, what could be more exciting than that? There
is drama in that. There is. So maybe I should look into it further because, and maybe there's an opportunity for, you know, a sister film festival, Barnes 2.0 in Thames Town, Shanghai.
There you go. Yes, we're sorted.
We should look into that.
Yes, thank you. We'll do that. Meanwhile, returning to Americaville for a moment, I expect that over the 6 years you've been creating the film, you've seen huge changes in the relationship between America and China. I wonder what the key things were that you observed.
Great question. As I said earlier, I did have an inkling that things would change in the relationship. I think when I first scouted for the film in late 2014, things were quite calm in both the US and China. But when I did return in summer 2015 to shoot the bulk of the film, you know, the presidential race was ramping up in the US. Donald Trump had announced his candidacy, and he was later elected, as we know, to President of the United States. And we saw this nationalistic movement in the US And in some ways it was mirrored in China. China has become strikingly more nationalistic, I think, in the, the last 5 or 6 years, with President Xi and a lot of these new policies that target foreign influence in China and foreign architecture, replica towns like Jackson Hole,
Yes.
things that are imitating the American life or British life. But I think as the US-China relationship soured, replica American architecture and lifestyle habits and media products really became a target of the Chinese government.
A symbol of what they considered to be a kind of traitorous response.
That's right. That's right. And this impacted Jackson Hole in a big way, and quite quickly. During my first year of filming, a New York Times article came out about Jackson Hole, and the Chinese press learned about Jackson Hole, China, from this New York Times article. And they republished the article and sort of respun it into their own articles, published all across China, all these different articles and blog posts about Jackson Hole. And the response was quite negative, and very negative in some cases. And you read the comments on these articles as well from Chinese citizens, and they really sort of rip the town to shreds and call the the residents of Jackson Hole traitors to China, that they've turned their backs on Chinese culture and favor the United States and the American way of life. And it did impact them in a big way. They were rattled by it, and it even prompted them to re-theme a new neighborhood that they were adding to Jackson Hole. Beverly Hills was already finished, so they didn't rename that, but they had a Colorado themed community they were building, and they promptly rethemed it as a Swiss town, because Switzerland is seen as politically neutral. China doesn't have any beef with Switzerland as of yet, so so they moved very quickly on that.
I'm intrigued to know how people reacted to the film in the real Jackson's Hole, because although this is the UK premiere today, you had your American premiere and you took the film to Jackson's Hole Mark I. What did they think?
That's right. So I had the premiere early last year, before the pandemic started, in California at Santa Barbara International Film Festival. It was a wonderful place to premiere the film. And then I did take it to the real Jackson Hole, as you mentioned, and that was the screening I was really most looking forward to. I wanted to know what the residents of the original Jackson Hole in Wyoming in the American West thought about Jackson Hole, China, and thought about the film. And we had a pretty lengthy Q&A afterwards. We filled the auditorium with local residents, and there was a lot of questions. I think they were so curious why their town appealed so deeply to the Chinese, and to Annie in particular. They were very curious about my main protagonist in the film. Jackson Hole in the US did receive prior to 2020 so many Chinese tourists every year. It's really captured really the Chinese imagination in a way, and I think there's this, I think, the right combination of mountains in proximity to water, to the river, and a very idyllic sort of Wild West town, very charming. I think it's just the right combination of aesthetics and history and proximity to nature, and stunning mountains that the Chinese really enjoy. So it's become a sort of regular on these tour buses that go around the American Wild West. You know, they'll stop in Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Yellowstone National Park, the Grand Tetons, and Jackson Hole. So it's become quite famous. It is quite a famous town in China, maybe even more famous in China than it is in the US.
Wow. And what about showing the film in China? Is that possible?
I have been looking into it. It's become harder and harder to screen documentaries in China without securing a permit. I have looked into getting a permit, but I think because of the stresses in the US-China relationship and just how sensitive it's become to display Chinese people living some kind of the American dream in China, never mind in the United States, but in China, is it makes it difficult to screen the film in China. But I am going to try. I would like to screen it in the community in Jackson Hole, China, at some point. I have no idea how residents there will respond to the film. A few have seen it, and I think when you see a film about your community, it's never your own impression of it, right? If somebody made a film about my hometown,
It's your
right?
film, it's your take. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And Annie's take as well.
Yeah.
Annie was so involved in a way steering the film, I would say. You know, I really followed her, and I felt like she was a very active participant in the film, deciding what scenes I could film and what scenes I couldn't, for example.
So she had a lot of agency about the way the film was structured. That's so
Yes.
interesting. I know how short your time is here in the UK. I know you've got big demands. You're now teaching at Stanford, and you've started on another film, which could be all about factories, which we look forward to, because I know that you will bring to it the kind of delicacy and a quiet seeing eye that we saw to such great effect with Americaville. But we are thrilled to have you back home with us here in Barnes, and please send our love to Annie and say how charmed we were to meet her. Thank you very much, Adam.
I will. Thank you very much, Jane, and thank you to the Wickers and Barnes Film Festival. It's been a delight.